hopefully. Welcome to Icebreakers game dev sessions where we talk about games with game makers. And a quick round of introductions. Finland, Helli, IGDA Finland. I do a bunch of stuff. Sweden.
Yes, my name is Kim. I am IGA Sweden. That's all.
And I'm Norway. My name is Sylvia, and I work for Noneta, the Norwegian network for video game companies.
Wonderful, thank you. And you're not here just to watch us and hear us monkey around. You're here because of our wonderful guests, and our guests are... We're going to start with Norway. We have Catharina, please. The floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Catharina Bøhler. I'm the CEO, game designer, and writer of Sarepta Studio. We've been going for 12 years, and our newest and award-winning game, My Child Lebensborn, is a parent simulation game where you care for a child, but this child is born half German in Norway after the Second World War.
Fair. Thank you. And then from Finland, my country person, Eevi, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Gorhosnen. I'm the senior narrative designer at Housemarque, and I've been working in the industry for over a decade now. And during that time, I've been a game designer and more recently a narrative designer. And on that field, you might have seen my work in Control, and now my latest work, Returnal, which is our award-winning game I think I'm going to be talking mostly today about. That's it.
Thank you. I like how you made it sound like award-winning, like it's like a bad thing. But,
yeah. You know, I have to be Finnish about this.
That's very true. That's very true. Thank you. And then finally, we have Oliver from Sweden. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello. I'm Oliver, and I work at Hazelight as a senior designer, and most recently worked on It Takes Two, a co-op platformer about, well, two parents going through a divorce.
So, thank you. That's really cool. And also, I gotta say, these are, now that I never thought about it this before, like these themes are delightfully Nordic. You know, after World War II, with like, you know, mixed, and you gotta do divorce and like kind of like dealing with the loss of child. Like, I'm feeling very Nordic. It's lovely. Thank you for the introductions, and thank you for being here, and thank you for hanging out with us even through all these slight technical issues. But let's get on with the show, and I'm going to throw the first question to the table, which is, what was the process like working on an award-winning game? I mean, was there something that you kind of, that's something different compared to like earlier games, or how? Like, tell us a little bit about your journey on that. And I'll throw Catharina first.
Yeah, so we've always wanted to focus on emotionally impactful games. But for My Child Lebensborn, we actually had someone, like a producer from a company called Technopilot. I met her at an event, and she had this very specific goal of telling the stories of the Lebensborn children. And as we were hanging and chatting, and I was trying to help her out with like ideas of how, you know, how the game industry works, we realized that we wanted to collaborate. And I think that was a very special thing for us to get someone from the outside who had this theme, this topic that we hadn't really heard about before, with this very, very clear message and this hope for improvement of history in the future. And I think that process of making that game and just being introduced to that theme as such a new thing, and then starting to work on that as a game, that was very, very different for us. And just doing that research and all the emotions you go through just working on stuff like that and learning about all the details, that I try to incorporate that now actually into games that we were making in the future, because this was just, it just made the process so different for us, and I want to keep holding on to something like that. It's being very emotional at work every single day. It's interesting.
It sounds a little exhausting, but maybe in a positive way. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's really really great. How about Eevi? How was it diving into Atropos in Returnal every day?
So I hear my camera is frozen, but hopefully.
A little.
We can still hear you. So
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am doing the podcast side, and you do the video casting. Yeah. So working on Returnal was really fascinating because it was the first time Housemarque, which is the oldest still functioning game studio in Finland with a over 25-year kind of like existence. It was the first time kind of like we were stepping into AAA space, and first time we were doing kind of like a really kind of like deep narrative in a Housemarque game. And the Housemarque games are known for being kind of like fast-paced arcade action twin stick shooter kind of thing. So when I first heard that Housemarque was looking for a narrative designer, I was like, yeah, what? But when I heard the pitch, I was like super intrigued, and I thought it was such a like leap, not even kind of like from the shallow end to the deep end, but it felt like from shallow end straight to like deep diving in the ocean. So I was fascinated. I wanted to be kind of like part of that and getting to craft a new kind of storytelling that I don't think has been seen that much in AAA space, and definitely hadn't been seen at Housemarque before. So it was really great to be there, kind of like at a studio that already had kind of like history and had its working processes and had a kind of like a reputation, and then be there to build these whole new structures, and you pen the kind of like the whole conception of what a Housemarque game is. And I don't think you get to do that very often. So especially even though Finland has a really varied game development scene, like getting to do that jump from kind of like one type of game that you're making into the different league, that doesn't come around often.
Very, 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 very true. Very true. And it sounds like you guys, or you got lucky to get there, and it sounds like you guys did really well because Returnal has. Well, I mean, it's an award-winning game. You did well. Okay, and then Oliver, share some Swedish wisdoms.
Yeah, I will try if there is any. But I think working on It Takes Two. So Hazelight comes from this row of games that have always tried to blend the gameplay and narrative in certain ways. First with Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, and then A Way Out. And both are fantastic games, but there was this kind of perception that we were removing gameplay to fit in narrative. So we kind of approached what we did from the opposite end here, where we said, can we go all out crazy with gameplay? Can we just be super creative? We were looking at Nintendo and we said, Mario doesn't really have a story. They don't really tread in that territory, and that works fine for them. But is there a way we could have those two, the very much extreme of having gameplay and also trying to have a narrative connecting that? And I think it was a very experimental experience. I think this is not unlike what you described, Catharina, which was, there was this very singular vision, this laser focus of telling the story. This was very much, experimental. What are we doing? Like moving and twisting pieces and, seeing where that would land. And there were many times where the game kind of twisted and took a new direction. And an experimental but very, very fun ride.
Cool.
If I can just pipe in, I gotta say I love It Takes Two. I played it together with a friend, and it was the most fun I've had in a co-op game in a long while. So just wanted to say that.
I mean,
that
yes,
makes me really happy. Yeah,
I haven't. I tried Brothers. I played A Way Out. I haven't tried this one yet. I'm gonna play. I suggested it to my wife, and she was like, "But we're not divorced. We're not divorcing. What are you trying to say? Something?" And I was like, "We'll see. We'll see." But I'm looking forward to get to play it as well. I gotta say, like, it feels like there's a common theme here in a way that everyone said that you kind of dove into something new, like something you hadn't really done before, and kind of like just trying something, and sounds not just something new, but it sounds like you threw a lot of passion behind, or you had a lot of passion behind you when you jumped in there, into the deep end of the ocean, as Eevi said. Which is, you know, there is no formula for an award-winning game, but I feel like maybe, you know, this is a good framework.
I was gonna say that too, like, because your games are, from what I can see, very different in you know, gameplay wise, and kind of what you were trying to create. But this aspect of like trying to make something new, or maybe something that people haven't seen before or experienced before, maybe could be part of the formula. I'm starting to get some ideas. I'm getting some good ideas here.
Yeah,
that's an easy one. Do something somebody's never seen before. That's
super easy. And make it fun.
And then you got to do it well, and that's often hard in games when there's no existing blueprint. We love kind of like looking at other games, like, let's do what they do. But then if you try to do something new and you just have to like just tread that path for the first time, that's hard.
Yeah, I'm pulling the I'm young and ambitious card, since I am the youngest in the group, which I don't think we've established yet, but now I'm establishing it.
I'm pretty sure. The baby of the group. Sorry, Catharina.
No, I kind of feel like it's you're gonna need to have at least some freedom, right, to be able to do something like that, because yeah, doing the narrative games, especially when it's like, hey, let's do something no one's really done before, it will drive you mad at times, and you just need a really good support system around you to be able to do that, and such a huge risk of failure. So I definitely wouldn't recommend it if there wasn't. It's kind of like, don't gamble at something if you can't afford it, almost. You know, it's be a little bit careful, because there is a lot of like survival bias here. So just because we managed, like, yeah, it's hard. Like, the game was supposed to take us 1.5 years and it took us 4. So I don't know if that's yeah, it's definitely challenging, but so like engaging as well. But it comes at a cost, I think.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right about the, you know, survivorship bias, where like it's easy to say when you gather people and find a common denominator, but I think there is also lots of other very interesting games that, you know, you have the first batch which don't get awards and aren't successful, but then you have the second batch, which is probably the biggest one, the ones that never even get released, right? That's a huge amount, and it's difficult being in unknown waters. Like, it can be super engaging, but it's also, you know, sometimes you look at it and you're like, you know, there is no demand for this because it doesn't exist, right? There is none, like, no correlation. I remember we had a talk about that with, you know, publishers and such, and like, a lot of the times the statistics of this is, you look at a spreadsheet and you go, this type of genre sells this much, multiplied with this, multiplied with marketing, and, you know, I think all of our games, none of them fit into one of those matrices. So, you know, the marketing people were like, we don't know what's this. who asked for a co-op narrative game, or like a deeply narrative exploration roguelike, or in your case, I think super interesting to have this, as I've understood it. I haven't played it yet, but basically systematically exploring, like with game design, like systems that enforce basically empathy and taking care of somebody and the risk for that. I think that's super interesting.
I actually have another question to you, for you guys, to pivot a little bit away, and it's more of a fun question for you. So, what is the best or the most memorable compliment your game has ever received? Katarina?
Yeah, we'll do
Yeah.
the same round type like we did before.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we've gotten so many amazing comments from fans, but the one that still sticks with me is on, like, it was in Chinese on this page, tap that they have, where this, I mean, a lot of them wrote like essays almost about the game, but there was one guy that had written one sentence that still sticks out to me, which is, as a 20-year-old male, I never thought I'd know the feeling of being a father. And then he continues talking about his daughter caught in, and it was just, ugh, God, yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
It just sticks with me. Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Eevi?
Oh yeah, that's a hard one. There's kind of two. There's one that wasn't about the story, but in general, like the first time I saw on our subreddit that someone had taken a tattoo that was Returnal based, and that just felt like someone loved this game so much that they're willing to ink their skin. That felt like a huge compliment. But on the kind of like my personal favorite out of all of the narrative stuff that I kind of like received was when recently a video essayist, Jakob Geller, did a video on Returnal, and he also did a previous video about the best games of 2021. Time has lost meaning, so I'm still like, which year was it? That's what happens when you work on a time loop game. It's very
a time loop game during a pandemic, which feels like a time loop. Yes.
Exactly. But yeah, he basically said that kind of like he's always been a Housemarque fan. Like he's loved the gameplay, and he loved Returnal for that. But kind of like the best thing about it was the narrative, and it surprised him because it's such a very, very shooty game. It's extremely Housemarque. It's very arcade action. Lean moves at like breakneck speeds. Like there's no kind of like reality to how kind of like the gameplay works. Kind of like it's very gamey, but still that the story kind of like surprised him and was very deep, and like all the words he said. The first time I watched that, I just had to rewind it and watch it again because I was just like crying because it felt like that hit me so hard.
Oh, that's a really nice memory to have.
Oh, definitely. And like a massive shout out for Jakob Geller. He has wonderful essays. Like definitely worth checking out. So I can imagine having someone dissecting your game for 30 minutes. Pretty intense, man.
And Oliver?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I think I have probably one personal one, just like design wise, which was this is super simple. I think most people would be like they would not notice, but I worked on an underwater level for It Takes Two, and the reaction is always like, oh no, as soon as somebody comes into that, and got this feedback that it's the best underwater level that they played, and they actually liked it more than a lot of other levels. And I was like, that was really touching. Then there was also the one, oh, it's probably the best underwater level I've played. It still sucks, but but it was a big challenge to make that fun. And I think just in general, I think there are so many people who are introducing their partners or their children with this game, and we try to make this game as friendly for like newer players, at the same time not compromising how fun it was for veteran players. And I think that overlap worked out really well. I think there, of course, still tons of improvements that we're learning from, but I think there is something really powerful about somebody being able to say that they were able to play it with their spouse that isn't a gamer or their child, and this got them to try other games, and I think that's super powerful to me.
That's a very good answer, and like I guess that's very specifically your kind of games. And honestly, I wish I had this game when I was a kid, and I could have been like, "Come on, Mom, come on, Dad, can't we? Like, come on, play with me." And they're like, "What is this Nintendo rubbish?" And like actually get them to engage. It's yeah, that was a great little point of view. Thanks for that.
Yeah, it's really cool to see like how, because I'm coming from a perspective of someone who hasn't really entered the industry yet, since I'm still a student and stuff like that. But it's really interesting to hear you guys like talk about how it really feels good to affect people on a personal level. It sounds like from someone that's a little bit naive, like a noble thing to think about as like the most important comment on a game, that oh hey, this made someone like think about their daughter, or like whatever, get a tattoo, or introduce a family member or friend to the media. Like these are big things in my view, and it's really cool to see that you guys really pay attention to that, and take it to heart. That's really important.
Yeah, very true. And like this is, so I used to teach game design, and one of the things I talked a lot about, and I could have gone for longer, is about emotions and the psychology of games, because a lot of people don't think about or associate games with emotion, but it's all about, like, if you're winning, if you're losing, if you're succeeding, if you're like, if it's fun, if it's not, if it's sad. It's all about emotions and how to kind of like get you engaged. And all of these games are quite emotional in kind of different ways and different themes, of course. And it would be really kind of cool to maybe hear about that, but also I'm tying this in because in the chat we got a comment from one of the viewers who said that marrying the gameplay to kind of deep and possibly difficult themes is always a gold mine. I mean, there's, like Catharina said, there's some survivor bias there. Like not all of them probably are, but yeah. Any thoughts on the like emotional side of this kind of games, and like how much you put into that?
I mean, when one of the first reviews we got was a Norwegian reviewer from Level Up, and he's like a 40, 50-year-old man, and in his review he talks about how he cried several times during the game, and as he says that, he almost starts crying. And I was like, yeah. I mean, of course, I also feel hugely guilty when I have a lot of people talking about how depressed or sad they got, but at the same time, it's I mean, I think there's so many great games out there that let you experience different emotions, and even though game's supposed to be, like, I feel a game doesn't have to be fun. It just needs to be engaging, and all the other medias do that as well. But to be honest, I feel like games have been doing that ever since I started playing them myself. Like, I mean, who didn't start crying when Aerith died in Final Fantasy VII, or were really impacted when you could feel the rumble from the heartbeat of Aiko's hand when you're holding her hand, right? It's so I think games are immensely powerful, either if they're made like to make you rage quit, or if they're made to make you laugh or cry or anything. So it's really powerful medium.
Really good thoughts, and I agree. And something I just found interesting, you said you felt a little guilty for making people sad, and I'm sure you kind of exaggerated a little bit, but I wonder, like, has there ever been a movie director who made like a documentary, like a sad film, and was like, yeah, I felt guilty for people making people feel bad? But I think games are different because you have to do it, like, it's engaging. You gotta do the sad things to yourself or cause the sadness. And I think I kind of understand when you said that you feel a little bit bad about maybe making people go through this thing. And I just thought I wanted to highlight it. Was very interesting. Oliver, Eevi, any thoughts on like the emotional part of the game or your game?
I think you said some super good points, Catharina. I think that games are just a medium to, when it boils down to it, it's all about emotions, right? Like everything you do, whether it's feel good or not feel good. Yeah, I think that there is also something about, for me at least, like playtesting. I think that's something, fine-tuning emotional response. It almost sounds like super dystopian, but you're playtesting something, and you're seeing people, and you're seeing like, oh, that's not quite the reaction I want. I'm gonna push this or push that to, fine-tune these moments and like find the beats that just press people's buttons. And I think the psychology behind that is super interesting, and just, yeah, it's essentially striving to share or to create emotions. I think that's super interesting, and I think something compared to film, which I think maybe should be done more, is like playtesting film? Like do we get the emotions we want? Like how can we achieve that goal? I think it's super interesting.
That's good points. Also, I thought I did laugh a little bit, like playtesting films. It's a good sentence. I like it. Eevi, so yeah, we were having some issues with the camera, so Eevi's camera is going to be off now. But can we hear you? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. So yeah, your thoughts on this emotional part? Like you cut out for a second, so just quickly. So about the emotional and how much games are about, like trying to get players to feel emotions, and so what are your thoughts about the emotional reactions for the game, your game, and how did you kind of approach getting these emotional, and what were your like thought process on that whole part?
Well, the kind of like that's the core of games to me. Like, how do you make players feel things? And yeah, it was interesting for Returnal. So, kind of like quick recap of the story. So, in Returnal, you play as Celine, who's an astronaut who crash lands on this alien planet of Atropos, and it's full of hostile creatures that try to kill you in various ways, of course. But she's there to chase this mysterious signal. That only she seems to know kind of like what it's all about, and its meaning kind of like comes to the player as they play the game. But it's clear to Celine, but not clear to the player. So there's this mystery. And then very soon, Celine dies, and then the kind of like the roguelike narrative is also put in. So it's not only roguelike in structure, but the narrative acknowledges the roguelike structure. So Celine wakes up back at the crash site, and she's aware of the loop, and she finds her previous bodies on the planet. She finds audio logs that she doesn't remember recording that have been, put there by her previous or future selves, because like pandemic, time doesn't exist on the planet, at least in the same way. So it becomes about this mystery. Kind of like the story is a mystery, while the gameplay is very much action. So it was really fascinating to try to kind of like fit these two things together. And the thing about narrative, especially, is that it's often comes together at the last possible moment, because it's so much about the ambience. It's so much about just like those things that get to go in at the very last minute, like lighting and music and sound effects. So I don't think it's a big spoiler that kind of like early on in the game you see this house on the planet. It's a totally alien planet, but it's kind of like Celine's childhood home, just in the middle of the alien planet, and you get to go in. And we have these several house sequences that you get to experience there. And for the longest time, they were the flattest thing ever. They were like, I know we're just kind of trying to go for this kind of like moody, slightly PT inspired thing, and it just wasn't coming together. It felt just really boring and gray, and I was like, is this even gonna work? Like, we were trusting the process, but finally, when we got to the polish stage and the lighting comes in, and it suddenly goes from this kind of like flat gray box into this moody atmospheric house, and it starts to look really creepy, actually, to kind of like walk around there when the floorboards creak, and when you start to hear her breathing, or you hear the creepy footsteps upstairs, and the music is just that right level of like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's not full on horror, but it's keeping you at the edge of your seat because you're not quite sure what's going to happen next either. So it is so much about crafting that emotional reaction and trusting that you'll get it once those final pieces come in. And especially at AAA level, it's so hard, and just kind of trust that kind of like the other departments come in and do their magic and create that ambiance that you're looking for.
That's a cool insight, and yeah, sure, like that's true. Like when you're playtesting, and it can kind of get a little flat, like you said before you.
Can I ask actually a question a little bit as a follow-up to this? And maybe you absolutely do not have to answer this, but you're talking so much about emotions and creating emotions with the players. Did you ever have a moment in your game where you had to actually dial back on the emotions? Was it a little bit too much when you maybe play tested with other people? And this is absolutely not something you have to answer, but if there's any of you that would like to.
The table is open. If anyone, if you had I see some people like making like little nervous smiles there.
I know. I guess for me it was more not toning or holding back on the emotion, because we didn't want to hold back anything, but there were quite a few stories that we needed to cut out. Quite a few of the stories we'd been told that we needed to remove. And actually, one of the writers from we're in a collective, and also Drössel was helping me on the writing. And at one point, he did actually stop me and say, Catharina, we cannot have all of these stories in, because at this point, with the amount of horror that is in here, people will go numb. Like it's just going to be too much. It is the truth, but people are not going to believe that this is the truth. So I recommend you cut out some of these things. And so we had to do that. So in that way, we dialed it down, but it did make the emotional aspect actually harder. But yeah, I guess it's to avoid that whole kind of numbness that you might get if you get bombarded with too much horror, for instance.
Yeah, no, I recognize that as well. That it's common in. I worked on some horror games before, and there you have to do the horror respite horror to be able to take it in. So I can imagine that, but on an emotional level. We had in It Takes Two, we have no avoiding spoilers, but we have an elephant scene that was slightly controversial. This scene is actually dialed back a little bit, believe it or not. So that's a fun little tidbit where like we have disturbing music on, but before we didn't have music on, and it was actually 10 times worse. Like even if it's this creepy, disturbing music, it was just so raw before that, you know, you really got like goosebumps, and not the good kind. You were like, this is brutal. And yeah, there were some parts of it that were tweaked to be just less horrible. Without, I mean, it's still horrible. I think that's when you watch the streams, I think it's also one of those blows that comes out of nowhere, so people aren't prepared for it. I think that also makes it land a bit harder than like if you play The Last of Us, you're kind of signing this contract of, I'm going into a horrible game. And I think that's what can be so shocking about this, that there is no contract. Like you don't know you've signed up for this. And also why it's so effective, probably.
Yeah.
If I actually, that's a great, like when Eva was talking about their game, like I played Returnal, and I was like, it's a Housemarque game. Okay, yeah, they like dialed up, and it's AAA, like it's like just face to the fist kind of action. Let's go. And I was like, yeah, this is good. And then it got kind of creepy. And then I got to the house, and I had played like Resident Evil before, and I was like, this has like Resident Evil vibes, and it was not what I was expecting at all. My wife was like, she doesn't like horror games, and she was like, I'm out, and she just walked out of the room, and she was like, nope, not doing that. And I was like, leaving me alone in this house. And it was, yeah, that like signing the contract is a great point. Honestly, that's a really, really cool way of putting it.
And that's something I really liked about Returnal. I think that was super cool. And I guess you worked on that heavy, where like, yeah, I think that really landed when you were in this mode of, you know, lizard brain Returnal roguelike, and then suddenly, what's this, going into first person, hearing the breathing, and I'm like, is this a horror game now? Like, I think that struck so hard to just flip that switch. Super good job.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, like, when we were playing the elephant scene, we were screaming, and we were like, no, we can't do this. We were looking at each other, we can't do this, but we have to do this. It was very, very emotional. So, and I remember thinking like, oh, the devs knew what they were doing with this. Like, oh, this is so heart-wrenching. But yeah, it was fun working on Returnal on that part, because we weren't quite sure. It felt like this, maybe it has been done, so I don't want to say it's never been done in a game, but that going from that fast-paced action in third person and then going to first person and taking away the HUD, taking away basically all your guns, most of your player verbs even, like you can only just move around and look and interact with stuff, and I think it takes away that option for the player to like make light of the situation. They can't jump on tables, they can't
Mm.
shoot at stuff, and they're suddenly much more vulnerable. Even though kind of like, I guess there is the contract that, okay, we can't kill you because you have no chance here to respond, but it's also because you haven't signed the contract of like what's going to happen here. I don't know. Nobody told me that there's this thing. So it was fun to get to play with that. And I didn't think the house sequences were that scary, but I guess because I worked on them, it hits differently for me.
Yeah, that astronaut. I've never been afraid of astronauts before, but that astronaut, no, thank you.
Now I gotta go play that game.
And I guess that's the difference between a horror movie and a horror game, right? Like, I have this trick during horror movies. Like, mostly, I don't get scared, but I do get jump scares, and it pisses me off. So I'll look at the corner of the screen, and no one really sees it. I'm not looking at the front. But when you're playing a horror game, it's like you have to pay attention. It becomes so much worse.
Yep.
You can't like hide away from it.
Yeah, like instead of being like, don't go into that dark room, you have to be the one who walks into the dark room. We're like, oh shit, no, it's horrible. It's rough. Hey, wonderful discussion, but we gotta move forward. We're running not out of time yet, but like, so we've also talked about kind of like award-winning games and how you made them and what kind of like approach you had and all the emotional part. And this has been really great. The other part of this, because this is a Nordic kind of themed thing, unless in case you didn't notice. Yeah. So out of interest, your thoughts about, because there's a ridiculous amount of games that come out of the Nordics, you know, especially when you consider what a small population we are all together, and a lot of them are, you know, both critical and commercial successes. So do you have any thoughts about what is it about Nordics and its long nights and sun-filled nights that makes us make these games, and so many and so good?
Start by asking Catharina, like we did before.
Yeah.
My answer might be sad, but I honestly do feel that the support structures that we have, and like the fact that we know that if our endeavors fail, we're not out on the street. We will have a roof over our heads and we'll have healthcare and stuff like that. I personally feel like that like lack of competitiveness in life, to me, it seems like I'm not sure I'd be able to do what I'm doing and continue for so long and fail so many times within a project and like just be able to continue going if we didn't have the amazing support structures that we have both in society and in Norway. I mean, we have Norwegian Film Institute, for instance, that support games that are a bit like games that publishers don't want to touch. Like My Child Lebensborn, no publisher wanted to touch that, but the Film Institute said, yeah, we'll give you money for this. This is great. And so the game would never exist if it wasn't for them. And yeah, just also me knowing that, you know, if at some point I fail because my games are too crazy and too ambitious and too weirdly narrative, I'll be fine. So I can at least, you know, just go for it. So that's my take on it.
It's a good take. I don't know why you called it a sad take. I think it's a very good take. But yeah, Oliver, Eevi, thoughts? Oliver?
Go Oliver first.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. No, I mean, my first initial one was very close. Was also like privilege, basically. It's. I mean, there are so many things that have gone right, both for the individual, but also for the countries themselves to have like lots of technological expertise and freedom that can be taught further, and like it's. I think it would be way harder anywhere else in the world, and I think that we'd see like if more countries got better support, I think eventually you'd see like amazing games that are treating just all the different subjects that are relating to them, because a lot of these games are emotional and come from somewhere, and I think it's interesting to see like broader perspectives. It's like, for example, in Sweden, I'm not sure about Norway or Finland, but we had a huge we had a huge company called Green that went under, and of course there are many things before this, but the Green went under, I don't know, like 2000 something, and that was like a big AAA company, and there were like 200-300 employees, and what happened is all of them just went around like seeds making new companies, which bred more demand, which bred, you get that loop. And essentially when you have something like that, that's like a catalyst for having an industry in a place. I think 70% of the companies in Stockholm, which are a lot, are thanks to that.
To continue on that, because I think a big part of the game development scene in Finland is thanks to Nokia and demo scene. I think those would be the two big reasons why it's so vibrant here. So kind of like we had the kind of like infrastructure, we have good internet, we have good schools that produce educated people that can kind of like work in this industry. And then we had these success stories, and we had these hobbyists, everyone who had a home computer and started making these small demos that grew into a scene, that grew into the kind of like demo groups, that grew into the biggest companies that we have here these days, at least on the kind of PC console side. And then Nokia and kind of like the development mobile games, and with that kind of like Rovio, Supercell, all of those coming out of the kind of like, if people still remember the pre-iPhone times, there were mobile games even then, and they were really cool ones. So like we had already that know-how before kind of Angry Birds blew up and became that big. And now it's this, pretty virtuous cycle that even when a company goes down, like Oliver mentioned, it breeds actually a lot of smaller teams and projects and companies. And kind of like there are enough small kind of like fish, and there's enough big fish that the kind of ecosystem actually kind of like manages to feed itself pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was gonna say like specifically the death of Nokia was what helped launch a lot of Finnish. It's very mobile heavy in Finland compared to especially like in Sweden. But like
Yeah, well,
sorry,
I want to actually talk about that a little bit, because you're talking about like Nokia. My first phone was a Nokia, and I played Snake on it. That was my first venture into video games, really. That was before I got a PS2 from my mom. It was before I played anything at any friends' houses or anything like that. We had Legos before then. That was about it. But so like, that's probably something that, from my perspective, has inspired me to become a game developer. Like just the culture of, video games are cool. But do you think there's anything else like from the Nordics that inspires you to make games? It could be either cultural, historical, or just the way the society works. Open floor, but Catharina, if you have any thoughts, you seem like you got something on your mind.
I would maybe add to that, like maybe culture, society, and culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel. Well, okay, it's not very specific to our culture. I mean, it seems like most of the devs in the collective are people who were kind of weirdos, odd ones out, and but at the same time, we are brought up to be very squishy and very honest and very, like, I see ourselves as hippies sometimes. And at least in Norway, I feel like our companies, like when we start a company in the studio, and it's all about like the camaraderie and working together, and there's no, it's a lot of solidarity amongst the studios as well, right? Like Sarepta wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for Krillbite, who loaned us money during a really tough time in our startup, right? So I think like extreme openness and honesty, no bullshit, just like get straight to the point. We have very short emails, very short meetings. Maybe that's also just like we're very open and honest about things and feelings, and maybe that goes into our games as well. I don't know. And of course, it's dark and bleak, and so you get inspired to make bleak games.
Yeah, that's very true. No, because I don't think that's coming from a Swedish perspective. This whole being solidarity in general. Of course, it exists, but also Swedes. I don't know, Oliver. Maybe you can pitch in. Maybe having some trouble with your cat, but a lot of the time when I see other Swedish devs, I get this like first view of like, oh, I shouldn't go up and talk to them because that's not the Swedish way. But then you get to talk to them, and I think that's where we get that solidarity thing that you're talking about. What are your thoughts, Oliver?
Yeah, you were right about cat trouble. I missed half of it, but yeah, no, I
the cat. The view. There's been people asking about the cat in the chat.
of course,
Go on.
She's not for sale. I think, I do think that there is a lot about, like, it's very interesting that you described it as very open. I think in Sweden, I would describe us as very scared of conflict averse, which is very interesting because I don't think that we're not that straight to the point. We're very much beating around the bush, like. Somebody saying like, "Oh, that's okay," that might mean it's not good, instead of, "Oh, it's great." It's very very interesting.
It's not like the Japanese way of being.
Not really, no.
But
speaking about being blunt, Finland, Eevi, any thoughts? I've heard us being described as slightly blunt people. So, any thoughts on this?
I was thinking of going on a different track, though. I can recognize both sides. There is the honesty, but there is also this kind of like little bit of wanting to avoid conflict and kind of like saving face a little bit. But to me, I think what makes Nordic games unique is that we do get a lot of the kind of like American or kind of Anglo-Saxon like pop culture. Like I think most of us watch like American and British TV shows, and we kind of grow up watching those. And I think we kind of like have this outsider's view into this kind of like Western pop culture. We're still part of it, but we feel like we're maybe a little detached from like understanding what does Denny's mean? What is the kind of like cultural meaning of Denny's? We kind of like get that it's a thing, but we don't understand what it means. So when we make, I'm again talking about kind of like AAA PC console kind of like aspect. So when we try to kind of like make games that are set in modern day worlds, we do take that American pop culture approach. We understand that this is kind of like the arena we should be functioning in, but because we aren't Americans or we aren't British, we kind of like end up, I think, taking a kind of like a really interesting twisted angle into it, like Max Payne. I think Remedy loves Americana, but it's a very Remedy, it's very Nordic noir kind of like take on Americana. It's supposed to be taking place in America, but I think and they do a lot of background research, so it's not like it's bad. It's just like the viewpoint into these things is so different because we are still outsiders watching them kind of like through the window, kind of like we're the creepies, kind of like, oh, show us the good shiny stuff. Like, how can we make the good shiny stuff that will sell a lot, or that we understand that this is the shiny pop culture that we should be kind of like consuming and aspiring to. But then we make it, and we aren't Americans, and we do sometimes hire Americans. We do welcome foreigners into our gaming companies, and most of our gaming companies function in English. So everyone's talking and working in English, but still, we have our own cultural knowledge. So when we try to do kind of like things that are supposed to be generic and universal, EA Western viewpoint, we still can't help but put our own things into it, or look at things like maybe from a bleaker like viewpoint.
That's what we're good at, being bleak. Hell yeah. But yeah, I think you're quite right, and I like the idea of the Nordic peeping toms. It's a beautiful metaphor. And I think when you talk about Remedy, for example, I think that is part of their charm. That what I've read when people have been doing criticism or just reviews, they said that it's like America, but it's not. it's like a weird America. So it's like a Remedy America. So yeah, very, very good point. Very good point. Great answers. Thank you very much. We're once again pressed on time a little bit, so we're gonna move forward a little bit. I'm gonna throw the proverbial ball into Sylvia's court.
Yes, I have the last question of the day, if that's all right with you guys. So, going back to the whole the industry in your country, in the Nordics, and winning a game or your award-winning game, do you believe that winning these awards abroad can enable your company to help the industry grow at home? What do you, yeah.
What's
Yeah,
up with
Yeah,
Catharina?
we I don't know, we can do a round table or just like Catharina if you wanna take the
Yeah,
ball and
sure.
get rolling.
I mean, yeah, winning a BAFTA is definitely like finally at least the national news wrote something about the games, and one of the interviews like, oh my god, games! Oh right, I forgot that was a thing. So I definitely think that even though awards don't always like pay the bills or anything, I mean, it's amazing for us, but I think politically, and when it comes to just, for instance, the Norwegian society, getting to learn about and hear about how Norwegian games are global and can be important. I think it's a really good thing to use, and definitely we keep using that as a tool for lobbying whenever we meet politicians. So
I think that's fair. I'm gonna be honest here. I barely didn't even know that Norway had a game development industry before I met Sylvia and learned about all
it's
these
super
awesome
tiny.
games.
It's quite tiny,
Yeah.
but yeah.
It's small but sweet because you guys have a lot of really cool developers, but just didn't pass the border somehow for me. But I'm really
Classic
glad I got
Sweden.
to learn about it now. Yeah, classic Sweden. I know. All the jokes go about Sweden. No, do you have any thoughts, Oliver, on this showing the industry?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think especially our governments actually showing them, because the more, press and stuff you get, the more, because here's the thing, in Sweden, I tried to look up the correct number right now, but one of our biggest exports is games, like Sweden as a whole. Like that's competing on the like, we sell wood and we sell iron and we sell games. And our games export is, bigger than ABBA, for example, which is huge. But the recognition that games has is, super low. Like if you look at how many grants there are for music versus games, like it's night and day. And I think the more recognition and of course the more money it pulls in, the more it's gonna take for the government to look at it and well, maybe this is a thing. How can we help support this? So in a way, I mean, I think maybe it won't pay the bills for a successful company, but it will definitely pave the way for, I think, newer companies pushing in and doing cool new things.
Whenever we were doing lobbying towards the politicians and anyone that would listen, sometimes we kept talking about Sweden. It's like, come on, guys, Sweden! Like, they have such a huge industry. Aren't we supposed to be, better than them or something? Playing off the making fun of.
Nordic competitiveness is in.
We've started it. It started.
I was gonna
Like
say,
Sweden's doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, for once we're the example, and then you dissed us. So back and forth. That's always how it is.
Also, I just want to bring in the Finnish perspective, which is like, why lobby the government when you take every trophy that you get and do a pagan ritual in the forest to grow our dark powers?
Yeah,
That's how you do
Exactly. Yeah.
we have something to learn in both Sweden and Norway about that.
it.
Yeah.
No,
try
but I,
this.
but I do think that it helps not just kind of like growing the kind of visibility at home, but visibility globally. That, oh, look at how cool the game industry is in Norway or Sweden or in Finland. Look at these cool games that they're making. I want to work for these people, and I think for a lot of people, like games that Remedy has made and now Housemarque has made are a draw for these people to come and work here. And I think that helps us so much to bring in more diverse voices. Like I was talking about the American thing, like it would help us so much to get even more kind of like diverse teams here and to get their viewpoints and maybe make them understand our viewpoints so we still don't lose the weird Nordic flavor that we do, but make it maybe more balanced. So yeah, attracting new talent here.
Mm.
I think that's a big key for getting these kind of trophies and the visibility that comes with them.
Yeah, that's actually very good. Finland doesn't being completely. I mean, I like Finland being a Finn and all, but like completely honest, Finland doesn't have that much to offer to a lot of people. Like if you're, from the US or the UK, it might be seen a little bit like, backwater place. Why would I go? Unless you have a family, I guess. Then you have kids, then Nordics are pretty good. But like the games have helped, and I think it was about 29 point something. Let's say 30% of the game industry in Finland is, people, immigrants who've come here because we know they've been poached from abroad. So yeah, it definitely does help. And I think in Finland we've gone far enough that I've had so many events where a like a PM or MP, not PM, MP would come to the event, and then they'd always start this talk with some sort of joke, which is essentially this, which is, when I was young and I was playing Doom, I wouldn't think that Finland would make money on this, ha ha ha. And then the whole room is like, wow. And they're finally gotten over that, and it's kind of like an accepted industry, like it's an actual thing, and it's kind of cool. And what Oliver was talking about, it's a massive thing in Sweden. If you think about Volvo, which is like, I don't know, like 50 years old or older, whatever, and it sold for like to GM for like less than 2 billion. And then Minecraft, which is like, I don't know, 5 years old at that point, 10 years old, sold for over 2 billion. Like it blows a lot of industries. Like complete, it's so big. It is the biggest kind of like entertainment industry in the world. So it's weird how little kind of credibility it has, and so it's I think it was a good question, Sylvia, and I think the answers were really good, and they do help to give it some sort of believability.
Yeah,
I have to say Norway's probably about 10 years behind Sweden and Finland so far. So I'm looking forward to in a decade when we're being somewhat respected. But actually, a little known fact is that our game has actually funded and helped create a charity organization for children born of war. So that's
really
at least
cool.
something we can hit in the heads of. It's like, okay, if you don't like games, if you don't think they're important as a medium, I'm sad about you, but at least look, we're also doing something that you can understand. That's great. So
oh, definitely. Yeah. That's really cool.
But the industry, there's so much good out there that I really wish we could just go through and teach.
Yep.
The public about the amazingness of games.
Yep. Definitely. And personally, I'm looking forward, in 5 to 10 years, watching you guys go past Sweden. Obviously, let's keep the
we'll see
inside. Hey. Thank you very much for this. We're about to quit, but I have one last question, if you don't mind, from the viewers, which is kind of it's about UI. So there's this thing in film where you're like, I will fix it in post. You probably heard about this, like whatever. In game industry, like there's this. I haven't run into this too much, but maybe you guys, which is kind of like, we'll fix it in UI. So because the UI does a lot for the game, and it kind of like how you enhance the player's experience, or how you communicate with the player. So the question here from the audience was kind of like, what's your take on UI? Fix it in UI, or like what kind of a tool? What can you do with UI instead of just telling, press this to shoot?
It happens so much. Sorry, it's just coming from fresh off that kind of like train, because I think it's used to patch up those issues that come up late in development, and also kind of like piling onto this is usually like tutorials get finished last, because the design is not locked until we're like sure, like this is the game we're making, this is how it's going to work, this is which buttons you have to press and how long you have to hold on, and blah blah blah. And so then kind of like those things usually kind of like snowball together, and you have to make these tutorials that are text-based instead of kind of like level-based, or kind of like that the game is teaching you through playing, but instead kind of like, okay, we'll just stick a text box, and everyone knows it's not the optimal way, but that's all the time and effort we have at that stage. So yeah, it does happen. We wish it didn't, but that's life sometimes.
Resources are limited, unfortunately. Catharina, Oliver, any thoughts on that?
For the new game that we're working on, it might end up being a bit more true. But yeah, previously, our previous games, UI is very difficult, and I think most of the time we've just almost tried to stay away from as much of it as possible. We've always made small enough stuff that we could do that, but in the future, right now, what we're working on, we're definitely seeing that, and it is true that the tutorial, and I think like a few of the games that we've made, even just the menus that we make, they come like very last moment, and it's slightly embarrassing, but I think we're getting better.
Hey, if it works, though, it's all good. Oliver?
Yeah, no,
Ooh,
I think it's Cat indeed. She wants more food, but she's already had her. Yeah, no, I definitely think there is some truth to that. I think Hazelight, we're working in a very chaotic, controlled chaos way that I don't think a lot of studios work in. Essentially, what we do is that we split into small groups, and like artist, designer, and you're responsible for like 2 levels. And like, of course, we do have creative director, but it's more of like a compass. So for us, this happens a lot where like, oh, we made swinging this way. Like it's a hook. Oh, we made swinging like this, and then everyone has made something different because we're all doing the chaos, and then we're jamming it together, trying to. It's very decentralized. We sit as a design council and then like try to solve this, and then some of the things that don't get solved, that's just like UI, like, and then it's a little bit sad because in a way I think it covers up a lot of the the level, the art, and also some of the stuff where like icon hunting, where like you see an icon and you just go for it, especially in like linear games. So it's something we try to address, but it definitely happens where it's like this isn't reading well. How do we solve it? And if it's a broader issue, then UI usually lands there. And yeah, I think as you both said, like especially tutorials and stuff like that, it comes in late because you can't make the tutorial until you know what to teach. That's just the way it is. And I think tutorials get a bad rep, but I don't think, like, I've played plenty of games where the tutorial has been super engaging. Games are technically always about teaching and learning. Like, even if it's just learning about what's happening next, it's always like that. So I think that tutorials have a bad rep just because, they're late additions to production. They're slapped on. I don't think that tutorials has to be unengaging at all.
Yeah, and it's hard because they're not like they're not something you can copy from another game. You always have to solve it for your game and what you need to teach. So it can never become like a truly solved problem in games, I believe. Everyone knows like what would be the best practice, like let them do it instead of reading it, but it's sometimes so hard to get them to do it right. So sometimes you just do the horrible text box and say like, well, you didn't read it, so
I can hand on my heart, I can tell that I played games where I just like box whatever, click click click, and then later on 10-15 minutes later, like, how the hell do I do that? Like, what the hell? And then I checked it, so it was there, whatever, and then so.
Oh god, when you're on the show floor and you're gonna have people testing the game and you're just paying attention, you're not supposed to say anything, and no one reads or even pays attention to any of the info you try to put in, and you just stand there, it's like, oh. Why do I even make it if no one's gonna try it?
But that's like in a way valuable feedback that it's maybe not engaging enough or something. But then like,
Yeah.
what's the solution? Who knows? I think this is actually something that we might make an episode on. UI/tutorial could be quite interesting because you can talk about it forever. Unfortunately, we are pretty much done. I would be happy to sit here and talk with you with you a lot for a lot longer, but we gotta wrap it up. I'm just gonna throw a couple of shout outs because we had it in the chat for Catharina, for especially like there was someone who said that that they are like half German, half Norwegian, so the game really spoke to them, and they had experienced some bullying and at school, and so it like really resonated with them, and I think that's kind of the dream, isn't it, to get that kind of feedback. Sorry, Kim, what did you say?
No, I was just agreeing with you. That's really sweet of whoever that was in chat to share.
Yeah, definitely. And I thank you for making it. And Oliver, talking about the elephant scene. So we got, I don't know if this is what you expected, but someone saying that their flatmate could not stop laughing at the elephant scene. So I guess adding music made it less creepy.
That's one of the two reactions. Either people were like, "Oh, it's horrible, I can't do this," or people were maniacally laughing. And I have theories about both.
That's quite fair. That's quite fair. And I guess last but not least, people quite liked your cat. So well done on that as well. Yeah, definitely. It was quite a pretty cat. Not gonna lie.
Is it an award-winning cat?
Exactly.
I mean, if she didn't run for all the food, she would be like.
Sounds like cat.
She's a star on our show, at least. That's something to be proud of.
Yes, always welcome back. Hey, really quickly, if you want to say some last words of wisdom, nonsense, or whatever, please feel free. Jesus. Getting too late here, and if you want to mention where people can find / follow you, that's wonderful to hear as well. This time, let's start with Eevi. This way.
Panic. Well, yeah. No real final words of wisdom, except maybe, if you find the freedom or a publisher that's willing to trust you, push for that weird new thing. It's more likely, even if it doesn't win awards, I think it pushes our industry forward and inspires people to, again, do new or weirder things. Everything inspires someone to do something, I think, even if you never hear about it. And yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me under nickname Silliet, so SILLIET. That's it.
Thank you. Those were some good words of wisdom. Oliver?
Oh, following those words of wisdom. No, I think no, I agree. Make weird stuff, and find something you believe in. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Oliver_Granlund.
Thank you. Good Swedish thoughts. Thank you. And Catharina?
Yeah, I think also, just for me at least, the best thing for me has been working with amazing people and really feeling safe and trusted and loved in a work environment. Yeah, that's really important. So we've never really had this, oh yeah, we want to reach this, we want to earn this and this much money. Never had any goals like that. Our goal has just been, we want a nice journey. So whatever you do, whatever you work with, doesn't have to be super ambitious or even award-winning, as long as like the journey's nice and you can travel with people that you like and care about. Yes. I have a Twitter. It's at Cat in Shadow, CATH, Cat in Shadow. But we also have a TikTok for our.
Well. Look at you being modern.
It's actually how we got a lot of our success from TikTok. So it's a great channel. and it's at My Child Game on TikTok.
We'll have
And if you're not on TikTok yet, it's like there's a lot of good value there. It's a great place for anyone who's super nerdy about anything. Like if you're really into games, you can find that. If you're really into science, you can find that. And of course, yeah, if you're into crying games, you can follow us there. So
who doesn't like a good cry every now and then?
Yeah, we just triple posted your TikTok in chat, so
there you go.
You're gonna get lots of hits on that one.
I gotta agree with you quickly. Like hot take, not a word of wisdom, but a hot take of the week. TikTok, best social media platform out there at the moment, easily, by far. Yeah, and I mean not even Gen Z. So
that's why I'm surprised.
There's hope for us.
I thought I would be the guy.
Yeah,
nope.
Yeah. Kim, now you're talking. Any last words you want to throw out there?
Oh, I get last words as well. I didn't think that. I thought all.
I mean, we can skip Sweden if you want, but like that's
no. I just want to thank everyone for watching. I was really nervous before the show, but with some fantastic guests and some fantastic co-hosts and really, really nice chat who was very patient with us. Just really appreciate this whole hour or whatever it ended up being. So thank you all.
Good words. And Sylvia?
I don't have any words of wisdom, but I do want to thank our lovely production team behind the scenes that did an amazing job setting this all up for us. So thank you so much for them, to them, and to the guests that came and joined us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, our producer is Vivian. She's behind the scenes. You can't hear or see her, but like she's the heart that keeps pumping this Discord Twitch blood around. Thank you very much, Vivian, and thank you from me as well to the guests, to the viewers. This is our first Icebreakers Game Dev stream and podcast, and it was, if we disregard the little technical hiccups in the beginning, it was very, very lovely.
Yeah.
So thank you to the guests, to the viewers, to my co-hosts, to our producers, and everybody. Take care. Catch you later.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Now I'm just waiting for our producer to...